Trauma, from Greek, literally, wound. Physiological trauma means serious injury to the body caused by an external adverse event. Adverse events can be caused by blunt force, penetration, extreme heat or cold, electricity, chemicals, radiation, blasts, or crushing. The injuries sustained usually cause long-term, or in some cases permanent scarring or impairment. A scar is an area of fibrous tissue that replaces normal tissue after an injury. Scar tissue has some unique and significant properties that differentiate it from normal tissue. Scar tissue is composed of the same collagen as the tissue it has replaced, but the composition and properties of the scar tissue are different. Scar tissue can have impaired elasticity, flexibility, strength, and general function compared to normal tissue. This is why tendon and ligament tears can result in long-term, or in some cases permanent, loss of flexibility and range of motion in the joint. Similarly, skin scars can lack the elasticity of normal skin, leaving them more prone to injury. Psychological trauma means serious injury to the mind caused by a terrible experience. Terrible experiences could include abuse, crime, disease, death, war, or physical injury. Psychological trauma usually leaves mental scars, analogous to physiological trauma leaving scar tissue. These mental scars are connected to neurological changes and structures of the brain, such as the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex. These neurological changes can impair emotional regulation, memory, and stress response. This is why a person with trauma may experience shock, denial, unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, hypervigilance, strained relationships, and physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. Not all distressing or disturbing experiences result in psychological trauma, however. A distressing or disturbing experience may reach the threshold of trauma if it exceeds our ability to cope and leaves some form of permanent or long-lasting mental scarring or impairment, analogous to physical scarring and impairment. Moreover, two people may have the exact same terrible experience, while only one may become traumatized and the other may become distressed and disturbed, but otherwise unscarred. There are analogous facts between physiological and psychological trauma. This is because the mind is part of the body, and it is logical to expect continuity between physiological and psychological trauma. Community trauma means the collective negative impact caused by a traumatic event. A traumatic event could include a natural disaster, disease outbreak, economic collapse, famine, political violence, crime, war, or terrorism. Community trauma can have long-term consequences for people's well-being, social norms, political institutions, the law, and the environment. Political institutions may react rashly and implement regressive or harmful laws. The key mechanics of trauma described in this video map onto groups of people as well as individuals. Trauma is a generalized phenomenon of human life that can affect our minds, bodies, and communities. The underlying meaning of trauma is the manifestation of mortality and malevolence in the world. Our encounter with trauma confronts us with the reality of mortality and malevolence, either our own or someone else's. This encounter can contradict our fundamental assumptions and expectations about the world. Trauma strikes at something fundamental to what we are and how we function. By violating a norm, trauma reveals the norm and how it's valuable to us. Our minds, bodies, and communities all have normative facts about what they are and how they function. These normative facts create our notions of good and bad, right and wrong, and therefore value and meaning itself. It was Viktor Frankl who identified 3 ways of finding meaning in life: through our connections, through our work, and through our suffering. Suffering is a key indicator of mortality and malevolence. Its presence alerts us to an underlying normative fact about life. Trauma informs us about the underlying values and meaning of life by falsifying a normative claim we previously held about ourselves or about life itself. Trauma represents a certain encounter with the truth, a terrible truth that forces us to modify our hierarchy of values, the truth of our mortality, the truth that we are going to die and that our minds, bodies, and communities are all inherently fragile and can be damaged or destroyed. The truth of malevolence, the truth that people can hurt you, that you can hurt others, and that you can do it on purpose with full knowledge about human fragility and capacity to suffer and die. In response to a confrontation with the terrible truth, we may affirm virtues that prevent harm and keep us safe. Virtues like adaptability, fitness, resilience, and growth. German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche is famous for his aphorism, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger," among others. I think there is both truth and untruth to the statement. An adverse event may not kill us, but it may traumatize us and leave us with long-term or permanent scarring or impairment. If we can approach the threshold of trauma without being wounded, we may still glean the wisdom of the terrible truth and what it reveals about value and the meaning of life. Adaptability means the capacity to adjust to new conditions, environments, or circumstances. Fitness means general physical preparedness and proper fit to our environment. Exercise science generally recognizes 11 components of fitness. Resilience means the ability to withstand adversity and stresses and recover back to or exceed baseline ability. Growth means the process of a life form to increase in size or improve in function. If we cultivate our adaptability, fitness, resilience, and growth, we may avoid succumbing to trauma in the first instance and recover better when we do succumb to trauma. Cultivate these virtues by exposing yourself to voluntary and controlled adversity and stresses. Do not exceed your maximally recoverable volume of adversity and stresses, or else you may cross the threshold of injury which could result in trauma. Ensure your hierarchy of needs are met to maximize your well-being to cushion the blow of trauma and accelerate your recovery from trauma. Strive towards your zone of proximal development where you can be challenged to assimilate and accommodate new information without being overwhelmed. This will increase your competence and expand the perimeter of the traumatic threshold away from you. Trauma teaches us the terrible truth about mortality and malevolence. Alas, the terrible truth can be inverted to reveal wisdom about the excellent truth of flourishing and virtue. Thank you so much for watching.